I haven't made any new videos in a few months because I am lazy and don't feel like editing them, because in my other videos I would make a bunch of graphics for them, which takes a lot of time, and I also have to do research, which honestly doesn't take that long. So in order to get a video out for my 20 fans, shout out to you guys, instead of making a whole educational thing, I'm just gonna be going through my aquariums that I have. I have 6 in total. Only 5 have fish in them. One of them has snails. It's basically just a quarantine tank, which, if you don't know what that is, it's a tank that you put sick fish or fish you just bought in to make sure that you can adequately care for them without harming or stressing out any of the other fish you have. A lot of people think that having a fish tank means gross smelling water and algae everywhere, which you will get algae. It's just natural when you have any body of water and any amount of light. That's just gonna happen. In my tanks, I mostly have little fish. I have 1 goldfish that's outside right now. I got that goldfish for free. One of my neighbors was moving and was giving 3 away. 2 of them unfortunately jumped out of their tank before I had a chance to upgrade them to an actual decent sized pond. I don't have a name for most of my fish aside from the one in this tank right here. That one's Tigger, and he's named Tigger because when I first got him, he was orange with black stripes. He is now mostly blue with a few black splotches. I don't know why. That's just a thing that betta fish do. They change color. So yeah, this video is gonna be more laid back. We're just gonna be looking at my fish, doing some cleaning, and that's that. So while I go ahead and get the water changed, I'll tell you guys a little bit of facts about this aquarium. So what's in this tank? This tank houses Tigger. I got him at a pet store, a chain pet store, you know the ones. I wasn't actually planning on getting a betta fish before I got him. I was away at college at the time, and I really had the itch to just get a tank, and I had gotten a few paychecks at that point. So I splurged a little and I bought a 3-gallon cube, which you'll see me maintenance in a second. And in this cube, I was planning on putting shrimp. There are shrimp in it right now, but at the time, it was empty for a few weeks. So I had gone back to the pet store to get some more plants, but then I also took a look at the betta fish. And by the way, I'm going to be using betta and betta interchangeably because betta is technically how you say it, but beta is how Americans say it. So sometimes I just flip-flop. So I was looking at the betta fish and explaining to my roommate who was there at the time how my tank would be too small for a betta fish because it's only 3 gallons and you're really only supposed to have them in 5-gallon and up. And then I saw this little fish, and he literally had tiger stripes. I'll put up a picture of him when I first got him. How was I supposed to resist him? And I knew I had empty 10 gallons at home, so if I just left him in the 3-gallon for a few months until the holiday break, and then I can take him home, put him in a proper setup. And that's what I did. I bought him for too much money. I kept him in my dorm in the too small tank for a few months until November when I went home. When I got home, I put him in this tank, and he's been there ever since. As for the tank itself, it has gone through a few renditions. How the tank is set up right now, it's technically backwards. That's why there's a little silicone little thingy on the side, because that's technically where the cords are supposed to go. It was actually on the island separating our kitchen from our living room at the time. I'm at my parents' house, by the way. I don't own a house. So it was on that ledge. Don't worry, it was stable. It fit perfectly on the little island. And you could see it from both sides. So at the time, it didn't really matter where I placed the wood that's in it currently. But Then I moved it into my childhood bedroom, and all of a sudden you can't see it from both sides anymore. So I basically had to choose between having the black plastic thingy in the front or having to rearrange all of the plants in it and the wood. And I chose, you know what, I'll just put the plastic thingy in the front. So that's why the plastic thingy is in the front. This tank has had a lot of ammonia problems. The last betta who was in it died because of those ammonia problems, I believe so. And I was pretty sad about it because I felt like I had failed that fish, you know? I wasn't there for it. I brought it into my home. I wasn't there for it. And then she died. And that's just the reality of fish keeping. When you buy a fish, it's like adopting a puppy, right? You take this animal into your life and they pretty much rely on you. Like, if you're not there to take care of this animal, they're going to unfortunately either pass or be really, really injured or malnourished or whatever. And a lot of people don't see fish as like the comparison I just made between a fish and a puppy. A lot of people would not make that comparison. They think that, oh, fish are dumb, they're stupid, they're ugly, and then at the end of the day, they just die in 2 weeks. Well, a lot of fish that people often keep as, like, you know, for their children or whatever that tend to die in a few weeks, they actually have pretty long lifespans. Like goldfish, for example, can live 30 plus years. If you take proper care of them, they can get feet long. But I don't know if this is a problem everywhere, but at least in America, people just don't care about fish. You can't pet your fish. You can't really interact in the ways that you would interact with like a puppy or a kitten or even a bird or a reptile. I could go on a whole tangent about how people should respect fish more, but basically what I'm trying to say is I felt really bad on a personal level because I wasn't there for this animal that I brought into my own home and that I had made the commitment previously to take care of. But what's done is done. You can't bring her back. I hope she's swimming in the big lake in the sky or whatever. So this tank sat empty until I put Tigger in it, and that was a few months. Like I said before, it took me a few months to get home. Tigger's been pretty chill. I have a sneaking suspicion that his color change might be due to the continued ammonia problems. The reason I'm doing this water change right now is because of those ammonia problems. Otherwise, if it's a planted tank, I usually don't really do water changes. The shrimp tank, I don't do water changes on because the shrimp produce so little waste, and there's also snails in there too. And there's so much more plants than animals in there. I actually have to take plants out a lot. So all that waste they produce is basically just getting absorbed back into the plants, you know, the whole nitrogen process. And then the guppy tank, I'm basically using as a plant grow out, so they're also just chilling. I've never had any ammonia in that tank. And then I also don't do water changes that often on my 55-gallon community tank because, again, there's just so many plants. And the fish in there do produce a lot of waste. Like, there's a lot of fish in there, but I have a pretty good filter on that as well. I don't really think it's necessary, and that's just my personal opinion. There's not really a right way to keep fish or to maintenance your tanks. As long as there's water in it, it's healthy water, it's not just tap water with chlorine and stuff, then the fish will be fine. So this water change actually doesn't take that long, usually, and that's because I have a siphon that connects to my sink in my bathroom. But this time I wanted to get to, you know, underneath the wood piece there's actually some mold growing, which is the cause of the ammonia, I'm pretty sure, and there's a lot of algae because of it. There's so much going on in this tank. It doesn't look like it. These plants have actually been in here for like a year and they still haven't grown past where you see them. Like only a little bit. I'm trying to get the ammonia down before figuring any of that out. Right now, the ammonia is not to a level, it's like 0.1. So 0.1 is like where you want to be a little worried, do your water changes and test your water consistently. But it's not like 0.5 where you have to, okay, this is a problem, I need to fix it. He will be fine as long as the ammonia doesn't spike again. He's pretty healthy. He still loves food. He's very food motivated. He's very playful. He likes attacking my hand when I put it in there to get something. So the specific tank that it is it's just like an Aqueon tank, one of those general kits. I didn't have a bunch of supplies and stuff ready, so I was basically just looking at kits. It came with an internal filter, which I have since swapped out for a sponge filter, just because sponge filters are easier. The internal filter, you gotta keep it at a specific level, whereas the sponge filter only runs on air, so if the water level gets a little too low, it's not gonna be the end of the world. Like, there's no pump that can be ruined or whatever. And that's basically it for this tank. Okay, moving on to this 3-gallon cube that I've been talking about so much. In this tank, we have some yellow shrimpies. They're just neocardinas, which are the easier freshwater shrimp to take care of, in my opinion. Depending on who you are, what water you have, you might have different experiences, but for me, these shrimp have given me very little issue. Initially, I had gotten 3 yellows and 1 red because the local fish store that I went to, that's all they had. They had yellows and then 1 red. I got that 1 red and then 3 yellow. This tank has some shrimp in it. I used to have a 5-gallon. So the 5-gallon that's currently my quarantine tank is actually where my shrimp used to be. Obviously, it had a lot more dirt and plants in it. I wanted to downsize a lot of my tanks. Before I went to college, I had 9 tanks, including a pond that I have not discussed yet and will likely not discuss, maybe? It just has mosquito fish in it. It's not that big a deal. So I had like 9 tanks, and I was going to college. I wasn't going to be here to take care of the tanks. I was going to have less money to take care of the tanks, and I didn't want to push that burden on my mom. So I got rid of tanks one at a time, and by the end of my first year at college, I am now ending with 6 tanks, 7 if you count the mosquito fish pond in my backyard, which I don't really count because I literally don't do anything to it. Initially, I put water in the pot, I put some fish in the pot, and some guppy grass. And that's all. It takes care of itself. They eat the bugs. That's their job. Mosquito fish, if you don't know, are native to Florida, which is where I am. And also, if you can take care of mosquito fish, do so, because they eat mosquitoes, as their name suggests. And they're very easy to take care of. So in this tank, I'm not going to do a lot of maintenance on it. Like I said before, I don't do water changes on it, unless the ammonia levels and nitrates and nitrites, all that stuff, gets to be too high. It's a small tank, so when you first set it up, it's going to be that high, and then you have to keep doing your water changes until eventually it disappears. And that's the trouble with small tanks, so don't ever think, oh, it's a small tank, it'll be easier than a big tank. It's actually the opposite. Disregarding the financial aspect, small tanks are much harder to take care of than bigger tanks until, like I have, you reach a sort of equilibrium point, and then everything kind of takes care of itself. But if you have a small tank with like no plants and like a too big fish in it, then what are you doing? Like, no plants is fine. Not everybody wants to take care of plants. I personally love aquatic plants. They're the only plants that I can keep growing aside from like pothos. Some people don't want to. They don't want to have like to fertilize it, which you don't need to fertilize it if you don't want to. Just get like slow growing plants or whatever. But they don't want the hassle, and it's more expensive. Let's be honest. It's more expensive to have, at least at the start, to have a planted tank, just because you need like a decent light, not like too powerful. I don't have the best lights on my tanks. I can't afford the best lights on my tank. The most expensive light that I have is was $70, and that's on my 55 gallon. It was like the first piece of equipment that I ever bought that was, to me, expensive. As time goes on, you'll probably find that like non-planted tanks, you have to gravel vacuum them, which, if you don't know, is like taking a siphon and like digging into the gravel to get all the poop and fish waste and uneaten food, if you feed your fish too much, out of the tank, because obviously that'll cause problems and algae outbreaks. There's more nutrients in the water that isn't being used by plants, so you're gonna have more algae, especially if you leave the lights on all day, which a lot of people without plants like to do. Basically, all I needed to do for this tank is scrub the algae off of it, clean off the glass, and then trim some plants, maybe. I don't know. I'm recording this before I actually do the work, so I don't know if I actually trim plants or not. I'm probably going to take some floaters out, which are the floating plants. They're called salvinia. It is the only floating plant, aside from duckweed, that I have gotten to grow in my water, in any of my tanks. So, and it's really taken off. In that sense, plants are very expensive because you don't even know if it's gonna work in your water until you do it. Like for me, pearlweed doesn't really work in my water. It works fine, like it grows, but not to the extent where I'm having to trim it back every single month. Like I have pearlweed in Tigger's tank, and I haven't trimmed that in probably like 3 months. Like, mind you, that tank has its own issues. But if you don't know what pearlweed is, it's basically this stem plant. It has a stem. It goes into the dirt or whatever substrate you have, and it grows. It's supposed to grow very fast. Like, if you put it in a tank, it'll take off and completely cover all your other plants, much like duckweed in a way. But it doesn't do that for me. In fact, pearlweed was one of the first plants I ever got, and that pearlweed just died. Straight up died. And I'll show you later when we get to my 55 gallon tank. The first plant I got to survive was actually Java fern, which is a pretty hardy plant. You know, I'd recommend it if you have a fish tank, which my 20 viewers mostly don't. It is kind of expensive. That is simply because it grows really slowly. So if you buy a big bunch of it, it has been growing for months and months. I have my first ever plant that I got to survive, as I said, was Java fern, and I still have the original clump of it, and it's gotten massive because it's been 3 years almost since I bought it. It's very hardy. You might have to get some fertilizer for your tank just at the start until your fish can like poop more, I guess. It doesn't actually want to be in the soil. It has a ribosome, so it is a fern. It's a fern. That's why it's called Java fern. So it likes climbing like ferns do on like wood or your artificial decorations that you might have. Another great plant that does the exact same thing is Anubias. Arguably grows slower than Java fern, in my opinion. There's also Bucephalandra. Those are very pretty plants. I've gotten a few from local auctions and stuff, which I might talk about later. But basically, those plants all don't need soil. Floating plants also don't need soil because they are floating. So obviously they're not going to get nutrients from the ground. Guppy grass and hornwort, maybe. Those ones also might be good for you. Guppy grass, it can be buried. I have mine floating around everywhere in like most of my tanks. You'll see it. Hornwort I've had before. It didn't really survive in my water. I don't know why. It somehow managed to survive in my goldfish pond, but then I redid my goldfish pond and made it bigger, and the hornwort disappeared. So you just, find what works for you. What was my point? I was talking about my 3 gallon. I'm pretty sure at this point I've likely moved on to my guppy tank because there just wasn't much that I had to do for my 3-gallon. For my guppy tank, it obviously has guppies in it. It used to house a small baby albino corridora, which are like tiny catfish. They are tiny catfish. That they're not like tiny catfish. They are tiny catfish. I love those guys. I got some, and then they bred for me a few months after I got them, and then they haven't bred for me since, and it's been like a year. So I don't know if it's like a time thing. I wasn't really seriously breeding them. I was just trying to see what would work. But I only managed to keep one of those babies alive, and I actually it's just now gotten big enough to where I can put it back with its like family or whatever. And they're in the 55-gallon. So in this tank, I have shrimp. Again, I have shrimp in every single tank. Well, that's a lie. I only have shrimp in like 3 tanks. Some of the shrimp actually have gone, they are brown, but they have like a neat yellow saddle. And then you'll see in the 55-gallon some of those shrimp, which there's shrimp in there because I just wanted to experiment. I didn't think those shrimp would survive, simply because they are small, and the fish that I have in there are a little bit bigger. They're not huge, they're still smaller fish, but they're a little bit bigger than like guppies. So I thought, well, we'll see if this shrimp survives. I put like 3 in there. We'll see if they survive. If they don't, whatever. I have a bunch more. And they survived. I didn't see them for a few weeks, and then all of a sudden I saw this brown, well, actually it was like dark red. I'll put like a picture of it or something. It was crazy. Like when I first saw that, I thought there was a roach in my fish tank, and I was so scared because I'm fine with bugs. Like I'm so fine with bugs, but roaches, I don't know. Maybe it's because they're inside that I don't like them. Like if they were outside, I wouldn't care. So those shrimp got a little weird, and really big too. The shrimp in my guppy tank have also gotten a little big. I think it has something to do with there being heaters in those tanks, and also fish in those tanks. So they're in the 3-gallon, or before it was a 5-gallon, in those tanks where there was only shrimp, and the 5-gallon before did have like 2 Endler guppies that I put in there because there was like a worm problem in there, and they needed to eat the worms because the shrimp were dying because of the worms. So I had to put the guppies in there to eat the worms, and they did eat the worms. So, pro tip, if you so basically there isn't really a need for the shrimp to get really big in these small tanks with no predators in them, and there's also no heater. So their metabolisms aren't as fast. They still molt. I still find shrimp molts, which it's kind of every time I have a mini heart attack when I find one because they basically just look like dead shrimp. I still find shrimp molts in all of my tanks that have shrimp. They're doing perfectly fine. They're eating, they're chilling, they're breeding. Shrimp breed a lot. So in this guppy tank, I have a mix of guppies, obviously. I have some Endler guppies, which are basically just like really small ones. Like they're the really small ones that are like blue with like orange on their tail, and then one that's like half white, half orange. There's 2 of them that are like that. And I honestly really like those guys. I got them from a fish auction, from a local aquarium society, and for pretty cheap, fish auctions, you can get a lot of stuff for pretty cheap. I actually got this whole setup that you see here with the guppies. Actually, I didn't get the insides of the tank, I got some of the plants from there, I got the light from there, I got the tank from there, and I bought the rest. And then a few of the guppies also. I've had a lot of guppies. These are I have some in my 55-gallon as well. That's where they were before I had this tank specifically for them. And I like to keep guppies in 2 different tanks because you'll notice, so they breed a lot, and unfortunately when you have an enclosed ecosystem like a fish tank, there's gonna be some incest going on. So, and if you buy guppies from like a chain pet store, a lot of the times they're coming from kind of bad conditions. Unfortunately, like kind of like purebred dogs. They just have a lot of health problems because there's a lot of inbreeding. So I I try to prevent that by switching out the males sometimes, between the two tanks that I have guppies in. And that way there'll be enough separation to where you're not mating with your mom or whatever. The baby guppies survive a little bit in this tank. In the 55-gallon tank, they don't survive as much. They still do, just not as much. And that's just because there's more fish that want to eat them in there. And there's also more space to hide in there, so they could be surviving. I just don't see them. I redid this tank a few months ago, during one of my trips back home from college. By the way, I'm in summer break now, so I'm home for a little bit. So this tank used to have a wood piece in it that I found at a construction site. I was getting home from the bus stop one year, and I found the wood, and I took it because they were building a house. They don't need like a little stick from a tree they chopped down. So I took it, I boiled it, did all the stuff to get it ready for putting in a tank, which is a pretty good way to get stuff to put in your fish tank. Just find stuff. Do your research. If you know what tree it came from or what type of rock it is, then look it up, because some rocks change like the pH. Like limestone changes pH. I have limestone right next to the shrimp tank. Let's move on to my 55-gallon. My pride and joy. It has been running since early 2022. This 55-gallon is my favorite tank ever that I've ever done. It took me a long time to gather up all the stuff that I needed to do it. All the wood I collected from that same construction site that I got the other wood for the guppy tank with. All the plants. I have been working on getting these plants for so long. When I first set this tank up, it looked kind of bare bones. I didn't have a bunch of plants. I had to get plants as I went because I didn't have the money to just splurge and buy a lot of plants. So in this tank, there are a lot of different fish. There are guppies, as I said before. There are pearl danios, which are kind of underrated because they're really pretty. When I first found them in the store, I was looking for just like any schooling fish, and I thought pearl danios, they looked kind of drab in the store, obviously because they weren't very comfortable. And I bought 6 of them. There are only 4 left. Like I said, it's been a while. And then one of them has like this tumor growth on it. It's had that since like a few months of me getting them. So I don't know what that is, but it's still alive. So like it's not a fungus. It doesn't spread to any of the other fish. So there really isn't anything I can do. So in this tank are the pearl danios, which they're really cool. Then there are the black neon tetras, which are some of my favorite types of tetras. I got a school of 11 because that's all they had. And I had just gotten paid. So obviously I was like, I'm getting a big tank. I have a big tank already. I have a tank that I could put these guys in while I wait to set up to the big tank. So I bought all of them. One of them died after initially putting them in their holding tank, which was like a 10-gallon at the time. And when I put them into the bigger tank, which is what they're in now, I had 11 again because they bred, and one of the babies survived, and it's now part of the school, I guess. Now I have 9, so I guess another one died, and I wasn't there to witness it. My mom didn't say anything about it, so it's just one with the substrate now, I guess. There's enough plants to where that's not really a problem, leaving dead fish in there. I don't like doing that because I'd much prefer just taking the fish out, putting it in the backyard, letting it decompose normally, which, by the way, don't flush your fish. It can clog your drains, and yeah, you don't want that because then you have to call a plumber, and it's like a whole thing. In here also is albino corridoras, which I have 4 4 adults and then 1 baby. I started with 6 of these as well. I don't know where the other 2 went. So I saw one of them. I saw one of their bodies. I didn't see the other one. So like the other tetra, they're just one with the plants now. I also have a Programi, which I impulsively bought at an auction like the week before I was supposed to move into my dorm, which don't do that. If you have a week until you're moving completely away and you're not gonna see this fish tank or this fish for a long time, don't buy another fish. Don't do that. Luckily, she survived. It is a female. I intentionally bought a female because I wasn't sure if buying a male would cause him to be very aggressive to my other fish, and I wanted a centerpiece fish for this tank, which a centerpiece fish is basically like the main guy, the main fish that your eyes are drawn to. I have all these schooling fish, even the guppies, they're kind of schooling fish. I have the corridoras, which stay towards the bottom, except when they're being freaky and going up to the top and coming back down really fast, because they do that. They're freaky sometimes. And then I have snails, and then I have a clown pleco in here. He doesn't like coming out. Like, he's very shy. He's very shy when he sees me. He runs away. Except when there's food. He always comes out for food. So I wanted a centerpiece fish, and I finally had the opportunity to get one. So I did, and I got one. And she's slaying. She's just chilling. I love gouramis. I love their little antennas that come out of their bellies. They're actually like little hands. They feel stuff with them. And then the shrimp, as I've said before, the shrimp in here are crazy. They're crazy. They're brown. Oh. Sorry. The pleco just came out. They're crazy. They're brown. They have like a lighter stripe down their back. The female shrimp that are in here are the biggest Neocaridina shrimp I've ever seen, like in person. So I don't know what's going on there. And then, as you can see in this tank, I've been talking up this original Java fern plant for probably like 20 minutes. And this is it. This is the plant that I'm talking about. This is the original Java fern plant that I've had for going on 3 years. I got it in June of 2021, late June, July, late July 2021, and it is now May of 2024. So almost 3 years now. Yeah, it's just a beast. Like, I got it for like $40 because it was already pretty big when I got it. So here it is. It's massive. You can see it's brown, like in some spots. It's not the most pristine looking Java fern, but that's because a Java fern that size needs a lot of nutrients. Like, they need a lot of stuff to be like completely good. And there are other plants in here, and it's competing with faster growing plants. So obviously it's not gonna have the same gusto as like the other plants in here that are like the scarlet sword that I have in here. It's right in the middle behind a bunch of guppy grass. Its leaves are like a maroon in color. It's nice and healthy. It's got a bunch of new growth going on. And then I also have the crypts in here are doing amazing. They're multiplying. I started with 1 plant. Now I have like 15. That's a lie. I have like 6 maybe. And it's gigantic now. And you know, it's just how it is. So yeah, that's all of my indoor tanks. Outside, I've probably shown video of my pond at this point in the video, probably at the very beginning. It's really hot outside, so, and I'm not really doing any maintenance to it, so I might just like do a little outro with like some video of it, maybe.